There is a certain kind of quiet sadness, isn't there? It's not the sharp, screaming pain of a fresh wound, nor the heavy, crushing weight of despair. It is something gentler, more pervasive. It's the low, melancholic hum you might feel on a Sunday afternoon as the light begins to fade, a quiet ache for something you can't quite name. It's the bittersweet pang in your chest when you hear a song from your youth, transporting you back to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Have you ever felt it? This subtle sorrow, this visitor that arrives without an invitation, sitting with you in the silence, not demanding anything, but making its presence deeply known. Our modern world often teaches us to fear this feeling, to numb it, to distract ourselves from its presence with endless noise and relentless productivity. We are told that happiness is the goal, and any deviation from it is a failure. But what if this quiet sadness isn't an enemy? What if, on certain days, welcoming it is not only necessary, but one of the most profound things we can do for our own soul? What if it holds a gift we can only receive when we stop trying to push it away? Imagine a woman standing before an old house, the one where she spent the summers of her childhood. The paint is peeling, the garden is overgrown, and a single key feels cold and heavy in her hand. Her grandmother has passed, and it is now her task to sort through a lifetime of accumulated memories, to decide what is kept and what is let go. As she turns the key in the lock, the sound echoes in the stillness, and with the groan of the old wooden door, a scent spills out, a mixture of dust, dried lavender, and something indefinably familiar, the very smell of the past. She doesn't feel the sharp agony of initial grief anymore. Instead, what washes over her is something else, a deep, resonant sadness, a form of melancholia. It is the feeling of returning to a place and realizing, with absolute certainty, that you can never truly come home again because the people who made it home are gone. The world inside that house is a frozen moment in time, and she is a visitor from a future its inhabitants would never see. As she steps inside, the silence is not empty, it is full. It's filled with the ghosts of laughter, the faint echo of conversations long since ended, the weight of all the life that was lived within these walls. Each object she sees is a portal. The worn armchair by the window where her grandmother used to read, the faded pencil marks on the doorframe measuring her height as a child, the stack of old vinyl records silent in their sleeves. This feeling, this bittersweet awareness of time's irreversible passage and the fragile, fleeting nature of life is the heart of what I want to talk about today. It is a sadness that doesn't break you, but deepens you. If this idea of finding meaning within sadness is already sparking a new perspective for you, take a moment to subscribe to Mind Decode Explained. We journey through these intricate landscapes of the mind together, exploring the hidden corners of our emotional lives, not as problems to be solved, but as experiences to be understood. A prize-winning poet, whose name I no longer recall, was once asked if he had any advice for young people who dreamed of writing poetry. He answered with just 3 words, "Be sadder." Perhaps it isn't difficult to understand why sadness is a constant companion to poetry. It is both the material that nourishes creativity and the energy that pushes the artist to the very end of their work. Sadness is the raw material because it changes how we see the world. When we are sad, we no longer see things as they are in our everyday lives. The scenery, the sounds, even the people around us take on a different color. In our sadness, we pour our own soul into the world, and that world, in turn, becomes intensely personal, imbued with emotional nuance. This is what our visitor to the old house feels. The way the afternoon light slants through the dusty window pane is no longer just light. It's a tangible representation of passing time, beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. The chirping of a bird outside isn't just a sound, it's a stark contrast to the silence within, a reminder that life, indifferent and persistent, goes on. But sadness doesn't just create material. It also ignites the motivation to create. Because in the grip of sorrow, we feel a conflict, a distance between our soul and the world. We know through a vague intuition that this conflict can be resolved or at least soothed through the act of artistic expression. The woman in the house might feel a sudden, quiet urge to write, to paint, to simply sit and describe the feeling in a journal. It's not about creating a masterpiece. It's about giving form to the formless, giving a voice to the silent ache within. This creative impulse is a way of bridging that gap, of making our inner world tangible and, in doing so, understanding it better. Of course, not every uncomfortable feeling can become art. Lassitude or torment also makes us feel distant from the world, but they bring nothing but exhaustion. Sadness is different. It stands between two shores. It is not as sharp and screaming as agony, but neither is it as bland and faded as boredom. Sadness is the kind of pain we can transform into beauty. But what if you are not a poet or a writer? What use then is sadness? The value remains, perhaps, in a form that is even more fundamental. Let's return to that specific kind of sadness, the one I want to call melancholia. This is the sadness that makes us keenly aware of the irreversible flow of time and the fragile, fleeting nature of human life. Melancholia is that bittersweet feeling you get when you return to your parents' old house and realize you will never be a child again. It's the transient but profound emotion that comes when you contemplate the truth that everything we love will eventually disappear along with ourselves, that this entire civilization will one day vanish into nothingness, that the earth itself will cease to be. And if you think about it that way, all our efforts, our struggles, turn out to be just a storm in a teacup. The French novelist Gustave Flaubert, in his Notes from Egypt, described another form of this melancholy-y wistful sadness, of leaving a place you know you will never return to. He wrote, "There is always a sadness about packing. I think it's the abrupt fact of termination, the passing away of a circumstance that will never be repeated. There are the melancholies of travel, and they are perhaps the profoundest of all the joys of travel." It sounds strange, doesn't it, to say that we can enjoy the sadness of ending a journey? But it's true. When we first arrive at a destination, we usually only think of joy. It has to be that way. Who sets out on a journey hoping to be sad? But when that sadness finally arrives, as it inevitably does upon departure, we realize it is not one-dimensional. It is deep, vast, and resonant. It allows us to touch a layer of emotion that, if absent, would leave our inner lives impoverished. Our soul is like a musical instrument, capable of playing an infinite variety of emotional states, just as a piano can play all genres of music. But unlike a piano, the emotional strings within us will remain silent if we do not pluck them ourselves. As the woman in her grandmother's house moves from room to room, she is plucking these strings. In the bedroom, she finds a small, velvet-lined jewelry box. Inside, there isn't any precious gold or diamond, but a collection of simple treasures: a smooth stone from a beach trip, a dried flower from a long-ago corsage, a ticket stub from a concert. Each object sings a quiet note of melancholia. She is not just seeing things, she is feeling the love and the life that infused them with meaning. This raw exposure to her own history, to the tangible evidence of love and loss, feels like what the researcher Brené Brown describes as vulnerability. It's the willingness to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. In that moment, she is not distracting herself. She is not numbing the feeling. She is standing in the heart of her vulnerability, and in doing so, she is honoring the truth of her experience. Perhaps this is why we love fiction. We read novels, we watch films, so that the emotional strings within us, those that have never been vibrated by real life, can resonate through the fates of imaginary characters. Fiction offers us a safe container for complex emotions. We can feel profound love, devastating loss, or heroic courage from the safety of our couch. It is a form of emotional practice. And because of this safety, many people choose to live on borrowed emotions rather than confronting their own. They might cry more for a character in a movie than for their own quiet disappointments. There is nothing wrong with this. It is a human way of processing and understanding the vast spectrum of feeling, but fiction cannot be a substitute for life. If we want to live fully, to experience all the registers of which a human being is capable, we must step outside of fiction. We need real joy and real sadness. And yes, real melancholia too. The woman in the house could have hired someone to clear it out, to neatly pack away the past into labeled boxes, avoiding this entire encounter. Many would say that is the more efficient, less painful choice. But in doing so, she would have robbed herself of this deep, resonant music of the soul. She would have kept one of the most profound strings on her instrument silent. Our culture often tells us that sadness is a problem to be solved. It's seen as a chemical imbalance to be corrected, a negative thought pattern to be reframed, a weakness to be medicated away or distracted from. And while this can be true in cases of clinical depression, where the weight becomes so heavy it makes life an unbearable burden, we have started to conflate all sadness with pathology. We have come to believe that the goal is a life free of any emotional discomfort. But what if that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human? What if sadness is not a glitch in the system, but a feature? The gentle melancholia our visitor feels is not crushing her. It might cause her a deep ache, but it is also something she can, in a strange way, cherish. Not in the way she loves joy with its bright, expansive energy, but in a softer, more profound way. She is not broken. She is remembering. The sadness is a testament to the depth of the love she experienced. Its presence doesn't signify that something is wrong with her. It signifies that something was once incredibly right. The great writer Marcel Proust wrote that we are healed of a suffering only by experiencing it to the full. And there is a profound truth to this. We have many ways of dealing with suffering. One is avoidance through busyness, entertainment, work, or even constant socializing. This can be useful, especially when the pain we carry seems to have no meaning at all, when it is just senseless agony. But the sadness I am speaking of here is not like that, or at least it doesn't have to be. In the attic of the house, bathed in dusty sunlight, our visitor finds a trunk. Inside are old letters, tied with a faded ribbon. They are letters her grandfather wrote to her grandmother during a war. His words are full of longing, fear, and a fierce, unwavering love. Reading them, she feels the sorrow of their separation, the terror of their uncertainty. It is a pain from decades ago, yet it feels immediate. She could close the trunk, push it back into the corner, and go downstairs to focus on the practical task of sorting kitchenware. But instead, she sits on the floorboards and reads. She allows their story, their suffering, to wash over her. She is experiencing it to the full. Another way to deal with pain is medication, which is entirely appropriate in many cases, especially, as mentioned, when the pain reaches a level that makes life a burden, as in a depressive episode. But sadness, like melancholia, doesn't necessarily make us collapse. It can hurt, yes, but it can also be something we secretly cherish, not in the way we love joy, but in a quieter, deeper way. The feeling she has while reading those letters is painful, but it's also beautiful. It connects her to her grandparents in a way that happy stories never could. It reveals the true strength of their bond, forged not in ease but in hardship. By allowing herself to feel their historical pain, she understands the foundation of her own family, the legacy of love she is a part of, in a much more visceral way. And perhaps this is the most important point. We can find healing within the sadness itself by listening to it, by reflecting on it, by tracing it back to the roots of what causes us pain, and by understanding its meaning. This is not about wallowing. It is about witnessing. It is an act of profound self-compassion. It's looking at your own heartache and saying, "I see you. I will not abandon you. Tell me your story." Very possibly, the deepest purpose of our capacity for sadness is precisely this: the ability to heal through the sadness itself and, step by step, to release from our souls the very causes that created it. As the woman finishes reading the letters, she carefully reties the ribbon and places them back in the trunk. Something has shifted within her. The sadness is still there, but it's no longer just a vague, heavy feeling. It now has a story, a context, a lineage. By bearing witness to her grandparents' pain, she has, in some small way, helped to heal it, both for them and for herself. She is integrating her past, not erasing it. Sadness is a quiet teacher that shapes our perspective on life. It is difficult, perhaps even impossible, to imagine a truly wise person who has always avoided sadness, or who has never touched the depth and richness of that emotion. Wisdom isn't born from perpetual sunshine. It's cultivated in the soil of our full human experience, which includes shadow as well as light. In a discussion of Homer's Odyssey, the writer Virginia Woolf suggested that the ancient Greeks had a very special capacity. They knew how to accept sadness as a permanent guest in the heart, a guest who neither comes nor goes but simply lives there. They lived in difficult times, and they understood all the ways that life could inflict pain. The people in the world of the Odyssey, in Woolf's words, are even more aware than we are of a ruthless fate. There is a sadness at the back of life which they do not attempt to mitigate. They are fully conscious of their sorrows, and yet they still live fully in every passing moment, in every small glimmer of existence. And so, they go on. There is something for us to learn from Homer and Woolf. There is wisdom in the acceptance that a shadow of sorrow is always present behind the curtain of life. Perhaps the Greeks of that era had no other choice. Their lives were harsh, and perhaps the only way to move forward was to learn to live with pain. But even if that wisdom was forced upon them by circumstance, it is wisdom nonetheless. And perhaps, in a modern world saturated with means to chase away sadness, we are gradually losing a part of that intuition, even though life today still presents us with countless reasons for pain. The woman, as she closes the door to the old house for the last time, feels this ancient wisdom settle in her bones. The house is empty now, the objects sorted and dispersed. But she does not feel empty. She feels full. Full of love, full of memory, full of a quiet, resilient strength. I don't mean to suggest that we should invite sadness into our homes. What I wish to share is simply this: we do not always need to fight against it with all our might, nor should we always passively let it enter. Just as it is not always the right time to watch a tragedy, there are moments when we need to protect our peace. But occasionally, there will be days like these. Days when opening the door to sadness doesn't lead to our destruction, but to our expansion. On these days, if we allow it, we can become deeper, more refined, more creative, and then in some mysterious way, become more complete, more whole human beings. The sadness, once welcomed and understood, doesn't overstay its welcome. It leaves, and in its place, it leaves a gift, the gift of depth, the gift of compassion. The gift of a heart that has been stretched by sorrow and is now, as a result, capable of holding even more joy.